G'day everyone, welcome back to the Boutwell podcast, and today I have an extremely special guest. Today I'm here with Brandon Kempter, aka the Comp Prep King, so I like to call him. If you guys haven't seen or heard of Brandon Kempter before, I extremely recommend you go onto his Instagram. I'll put the links down below into the actual podcast itself. He is probably one of the most shredded people I've ever seen who's pushed natural bodybuilding to the absolute limits. And it sort of makes me proud to be of Australian and also a fellow natural athlete to be like, yes, we can look that good. It's possible. Look at Brandon. He's getting it done. And he helps seriously hundreds and hundreds of other people get ready for contest prep. He's absolute specialist in it. He's researching like crazy. He's got all the degrees and all the stuff for it. It's absolutely amazing. I love watching his journey. And probably going to hit him up for some coaching for myself, to be honest. So if anyone wants to get coaching from Brandon's, get in line. So yeah, man, thanks for jumping onto the podcast.
Oh, my friend, thank you so much for having me today. And that was an absolutely phenomenal introduction. Thank you so much. I'm feel so fortunate. Thank you.
Oh, dude, we're just being honest here. Just being honest, man. Appreciation's due where appreciation is due. That's for sure.
Well, thank you, my brother.
Yeah. So just first question, I just like to ask you, just might as well get right into it. Because obviously you've prepped so many times yourself and you've prepped so many people. What do you think would be some of the biggest struggles in terms of contest prep that you've recognized and overcome that have really helped your mindset when coming into contest preps?
Yeah, I mean, look, as you know, being a fellow competitor, contest preparation is a sport of extremes. It really is. And as a product of that, it definitely, encompasses some very, very unique challenges. And, with contest preparation, I think what makes it so challenging is it's a long process. And I would describe contest prep as a bit of an abrasive process where, you come and live a day in your shoes at 2 weeks out from a show. It's pretty easy to do. But when you've been dieting for such a duration, it kind of wears at you. And that's the most challenging piece, overall. And I think that there's many singular components that make the process hard. But really, I think the primary couple of pieces is one, hunger. Hunger is something that you really need to learn to manage and accept. And I think that's something that a lot of first-time competitors really struggle with. They really focus on how inescapable the hunger is, and it kind of eats at them. And the other thing is, the decrease in perceived energy. As you have experienced at the end of your contest preparation, energy intake is lower compared to the off-season, and your energy lower. And as a product of that, your inert energy conservation cues are upregulated. You feel less energetic. And standard tasks in your day by default become more challenging. For me, okay, I'm going to go vacuum the house. Usually that's not an issue. At the end of a contest preparation, I nearly need to psych myself up to, haul my ass out of the chair to go and vacuum the house. So, those sort of things, that's what makes it more, really quite challenging. Over time, it wears at you. If you pour water over stone for long enough, it wears the stone. And that's what contest prep is. You're not dieting for 2 weeks. You're probably going to be dieting for in excess of 20 weeks. And that's what makes it, so challenging.
Yeah. So how have you yourself personally, how have you overcome those things? Have you got any certain strategies or you just face it?
Look, I don't think there's any single strategy, but I mean, for me personally, and something that I recommend for athletes, when it comes to hunger, we need to obviously do what we can to manage it through food volume and a variety of other little tips and tricks. However, we need to be okay with the fact that we can't circumvent it. Mm-hmm. We need to learn to accept it. Mm-hmm. In having acceptance of hunger being part of the process, it by default makes it easier because okay, this is normal and this is part of it. And I think also trying to turn every negative into a positive. This is probably good, philosophical goodness for anything in life. But if we're going to look at hunger, for example, the way I would look at it is like this. One, we appeal to logic. Why am I hungry? I'm hungry because I'm in an energy deficit and I am at very low body fat levels and I'm endeavoring to get leaner. Now, is being in an energy deficit conducive to my goals of getting completely shredded and looking really awesome on stage? Yes. Okay. We're now going to positively correlate hunger with diet effect. I'm hungry. Okay, this is a positive thing. It's not that simplistic, but we're looking at this from a psychological perspective. Okay, cool. Now we can accept that and mentally sectionalize it. versus I'm hungry. What can I do to not be hungry? That's not a thought process that's really going to be positive for you. And then when it comes to perceived energy, my recommendation is to really break all your tasks down, break everything, everything down. If you're having a hard training session and you don't feel like it, for example, you take it set by set. You're not looking at this session as, 4 or 5 movements. You're just focusing on the next set, just the next set. You break everything down into bite-sized pieces. And I think that makes it easier to sort of work through. And over time, I think you create that mental, toughness. I really feel like once you've done a good contest preparation, as you've probably experienced, you come out the other side of that just like, wow. Like when you're functioning at 10 out of 10 again in the off season, you're like, man, I feel superhuman. I've got great time management. I've got bottomless energy. Like, wow. I think it just sort of sets you up for a lot of productivity coming out of the contest prep in life as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. And I think actual preempting, like knowing that you're going to be hungry and not having it come into like such of a shock is like really important. Like, oh, I knew I was going to be hungry and here now I'm hungry. And I think that's really important. What you were saying with like the whole philosophy, I can't even say that word, philosophy side of things, like trying to figure all those out. Cause I think it's like, it's really important just to understand that, what you're like, when you're integral to your word and you do what you say, especially coming into a contest prep, like I'm going to do this, I'm not going to cheat, I'm going to stick to all these things like as best as I possibly can. And you enter the competition and you know that you've done the best that you can is like the most rewarding thing, like ever, I find. And then the after period of that is like, it's just so blissful.
It really is. And I think that another thing to keep in mind is that it's a temporary phase as well. Like it might not be 2 days, but it's still temporary. So a lot of people say like, oh, contest preparation is not sustainable. And I'm like, newsflash, it's not supposed to be sustainable. You don't live like that forever. Like it's you do what's necessary to achieve the outcome within the limitations of being safe, right? And the physique is a custom-made physique for the stage, not lifestyle. Then you get out there and you retreat back to a healthy body composition. If you can mentally accept that I'm experiencing, I'm feeling how I'm feeling because I'm doing X, Y, Z, and it's temporary, then, that's again, another positive piece. Note that it is temporary. And I really feel like you do invest a lot into it. And if you don't love it, it's not for you. But if you love it, then it's definitely worth it. And when you get on stage is when you get your energy back. I couldn't think of anything more kind of challenging than putting all the effort in there and then, not getting on stage, really like 2 weeks out, which unfortunately has happened on a couple of occasions due to the unfortunate state of the world, right? Certain virus. But it's very heartbreaking because when you get on stage, when you get all that energy back, it's like you're investing in your result. You get on stage, and as you've experienced, it's the most wonderful thing. It's like, wow, like there's so much pride in showing off your canvas. And the people that attend shows are the people, as spectators, are the people who appreciate the work that goes into creating that physique. So it's such a cool piece to get the energy back on stage. It really is.
Oh, 100%. I couldn't agree anymore. So just a quick question. How do you attack a contest prep? Like, what do you actually do? Like, how do you like mentally get ready? And then what are the stages that you sort of go through for a contest preparation?
Yeah. I mean, look, I suppose from a mechanistic perspective, like as a coach and competitor, I'm very planned with what I do. And I think from the perspective, like a mental perspective, you definitely want to come into your contest preparation, having had a really a good off season and knowing that you're in a better position than prior, or if it's your first time getting on stage, at least being in the best position. And you want to go in with your eyes open with regard to what's involved, because it's not an easy process. And if it's someone's first time, then you want to have a good coach in your corner, to sort of inform you as to what you're getting in for. And I do think it's very important as well to really be 100% committed. I think if you're not 100% committed when the going gets tough, you'll give yourself an out. I mean, that's human nature. We are designed to avoid discomfort. So you need to make sure that you really love it and you committed just your being to it.
Yeah, I like to say 100% commitment's a breeze and 99% commitment's a bitch.
Dude, I'm going to steal that because it really is. It really is. Like someone said, if someone says to me like, "Oh, I'm really struggling with like, okay, we're probably going to go down a really slippery rabbit hole of like food psychology if we get into like nutritional adherence." But I feel like when it comes to nutritional adherence, you will be challenged in that regard in the context of a contest prep. But if you mentally have non-adherence as an option, it makes it harder. For me, mentally, I can be around any food in contest prep because I know that I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not an option for me not to do what's necessary to get the result. And if you're 100% all in, like you said, it's not a breeze, but compared to being 99% in, it's definitely a breeze.
Yeah, so true. So what are some of the things that you actually track when you're in a contest prep, and how do you like phase them down?
Yeah. I mean, look, from the perspective of nutrition parameters, we're obviously going to track calories, macronutrients. We're going to take care of our meal timing in terms of carbohydrate in proximity to training, protein dosing to spike postprandial muscle protein synthesis. Like those fundamental pieces we're absolutely going to track. Training wise, we're obviously going to track both quantitative and qualitative metrics. Like the quantitative stuff is, loading. So rep sets and weight on the bar or machine. The subjective stuff we're going to track is, how your body's feeling. Are we getting any muscular, are we experiencing signs of overtraining, delayed onset muscle soreness that is higher than usual, any connective tissue issues, etc. We're also going to look at things like the pump, for example, which is a subjective, could be seen as I suppose, a subjective means of assessing training quality and recoverability. And then from a body composition perspective, for bodybuilding, the way you look is what wins shows. And I think this is one of the challenging things when it comes to assessing progress, because we don't have many quantitative markers. We can track body weight as a surrogate marker for changes in body composition. We can track body composition through things like DEXA, but they have limitations, and the sensitivity might not be high enough for our needs when we're tracking things week to week. So really, how we look is what wins shows. So we're going to sort of take into consideration, everything we can, performance, how the athlete's feeling, how the athlete's looking, and then adjust our parameters from there. That's, again, lots of stuff mashed up in there. I hope that actually makes sense.
Oh, it made sense to me, that's for sure. So why do you think people should actually do a contest prep? Like, I think in general that like many people would really benefit just doing something where they spend some time like actually getting lean, just to get comfortable with like feeling hungry and like knowing what to do, so that they'd be like, oh, like this is what it's like. Because I find that we're so abundant in food, and like with gyms and energy, it's sort of like we're just training and eating and training and eating and training and eating, or not doing much and eating, or whatever it is. But it's like, from your perspective, like, why do you think people should actually get on stage?
I think bodybuilding is like most sports, where for the right person, it's a really, really good thing. And for the wrong person, it's probably not such a great thing. I think that, there's wonderful aspects of bodybuilding, and there's perhaps, I suppose, some drawbacks. And the drawback is that, we are going to have to eat in a way that is not, I suppose, nutritionally, our eating habits are not going to be functional for life in a contest prep. Okay. But that's part of the process. So if someone has, a history of eating disorder, I'd say like, okay, this is probably going to exacerbate that. So that'd be one scenario where I'd say it's probably not a good idea. But in general, if the reasons are central, right? It's not like I want to get in shape for Instagram. I want to get in shape for someone else. It's more a matter of John, Jeanette, Brandon, Corey, whatever, want to take my physique, my canvas, and see what I can do through it, through strategic manipulation of training and nutrition. I would say, fantastic. This is a central goal. This is a good thing for you. Let's put the systems in place, and let's, let's challenge you physically and mentally and take this canvas as far as possible. And for the right person, I think it's amazing. And, I do think that for the right person, bodybuilding is more than just lifting weights and tracking food. It's much more than that. It's almost like we have, I'm about as science-based as it gets. I'm very logical, but it's almost as if we have a spiritual connection to it, right? We are one with the bodybuilding.
I agree so much.
But I feel like the lessons we learn in bodybuilding for the right person can be positively transferred to every aspect of life. And I'm going to give you some personal anecdote here. Now, I've been bodybuilding for a long time. I started bodybuilding in my late teens. So I would say almost the majority portion of my life has been spent bodybuilding. But prior to bodybuilding, I was a very impatient child, super impatient, want things now, etc. But I was also very determined. So what bodybuilding taught me in my young years was how to look longitudinally, not next day. Let's look years in advance. It also taught me the definition of hard work and persistence, right? If I can dedicate myself, my being, to changing my health, my morphological shape, can I take those life lessons and put them into academic endeavors or whatever? And I think for the right person, it's amazing. I have literally seen people who have had some very interesting life struggles do one of the most challenging things that they've ever done in their life, a contest preparation, come out the back end of that, and then literally be able to take on endeavors that their prior to bodybuilding would never even have considered and succeed in it. So, I think, a lot of the lessons there in bodybuilding, it's like it just transfers to a lot of areas of life for the right person,
Yeah, especially if they've got the right reasons as well. I couldn't agree with more for that. I put to a lot of all the stuff that either I do now, my sense of fulfillment, where I find value. Whenever I'm struggling with something, it's well, it wasn't as hard as that, so we can get it done. You know what I mean? If I can go through that and I can be that laser focused on something, I can be that laser focused on anything else. And I always kind of find that when I'm bodybuilding, or in a contest prep, everything else in my life kind of works really well. And I think it's just because I'm prioritizing my body, maybe besides the last 2-3 weeks, then it's just all right, you're way too much.
Life stops.
Yeah.
It has the capacity to tear someone down in a positive way, right? So for me personally, I finished a contest preparation with more gratitude for the basic things in life, like food, but just in general, more gratitude than ever, right? So when I finish a contest preparation, it's, my head's not in anything materialistic or anything like that, because the focus is so central. It's on something so pure. It's yourself. I think there's beauty in that. And I finished a contest preparation, and like I said, the gratitude in general is just, it's amazing. I just want to give back to these people who have, supported me. Like my fiance, for example, last time we prepped, she was an absolute angel. So for the right person, it's a really cool experience to go through.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. So as well, you research and study like crazy, and obviously you've been coaching people for a long period of time, and I'm assuming that some of your strategies for how you approach things may have evolved. So just a question, what are some of the new things that you have found out, just little key bits of information or something that you're just this is amazing, I can't wait to try the strategy or use it, or just finding something out? Is there anything that sort of...
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, you put me on the spot, man, but I like it. I think that definitely if you whatever profession you're involved in, I think that in time, your strategy and the way you do things will evolve. And I can definitely say from my perspective, it certainly has. And, every single contest preparation that I personally do as an athlete, and every single season that I do as a coach, I do participate in self-reflection. What worked, what didn't work, what can we do better? And I think that there is always something that you can improve on. And I dare say that I am continually improving as a coach, both in my active endeavors, my active academic pursuits, but also in the hands-on side of coaching. You get better at learning how to read people. And that goes for in speaking in a broad generalized manner, but also each individual. probably like you, I have the opportunity to work with people on quite a long-term basis. I get to know my people. So, you just learn how to read people better. In terms of one specific thing, someone asked me something similar to this a little while back. He said to me, like, what's something that's completely changed your whole entire everything? And I'm like, there has not been anything in recent that's changed my whole entire everything. But I think if I was to look back at myself as a coach 6 years ago, I would say, like, wow, like what I do is much more refined. The art of coaching has got better. And the art is the hard part, because the science is simple. Well, not simple, but it's logical, it's systematic. The science of knowing what variables to change and, and what influence it should have on your physiology/biology. The art is knowing which combination of those variables to change at what times and at what ratios with this living human. That's the art. So I'd say the art's got more refined, but I'm sorry, that's kind of halfway answering your question, but not really. I do apologize.
That's all right. I get it. Have you got any examples of those? Any of like the variables or ratios that you may have found? Like, I know that, like, you look at a lot of studies in terms of like, oh, how much protein should someone digest? How much like water should someone actually be drinking? Which sort of a lot of the time is like, yes, for contest prep, but also just for like general like well-being as well.
Yeah. I mean, look,
certain foods to eat, they like, that's low volume, high nutrient, like food. I just research this. It's great. I've been using this recently. Yeah.
Look, I mean, in general, I would consider myself what I call an evidence-informed practitioner. We take the information, take the information, we put it into practice, but obviously we apply, logic to that in modulating it, because all the guidelines that we have in place are exactly that, guidelines, which don't infer rigidity like a protocol would. But in recent time, I would say, like, since the commencement of my endeavors as a coach, it's interesting you mentioned protein. These days I'm probably not as liberal with the inclusion of protein as perhaps I would have been when I first started bodybuilding. A decade ago, even more so than now, bodybuilding was a very tradition-based sport. John did this, therefore I do this. Arnie did this, therefore I do this. These days, we have a lot more information available. Don't get me wrong, there's still gaps, and there's going to be gaps forever. Even in this day and age, we're using, when it comes to peaking athletes, until very recently we were using glycogen synthesis studies on endurance athletes, and then making the inference on how that applies to a bodybuilding population. But we're getting more intelligent as time, as a community of coaches. But one thing that may have changed over the past decade is probably not going to put someone on 4 grams per kilo protein like perhaps someone put me on when I was like 18 years old, for example. But that'd be one area.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. And also one interesting conversation that we've had previously, like beforehand, which I find is fantastic, is that like one of my goals naturally is to try to get my testosterone up to 700, and you did. And I'm extremely jealous. I want to know, like, how did you do it, man?
Well, see, I did get my test levels they were up at 700 before I started my contest preparation.
Yeah, before a contest prep. Yeah, so it's definitely off season, whereas like before they're going to start dropping for sure. But,
to share with you.
Yeah, sorry.
I actually had a 63% suppression in testosterone by the end of my contest preparation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which is, of course, an unfortunate. Unfortunately, it's a normal side effect. We're going to have a decrease in reproductive function and sex hormones as a product of the dieting condition. The goal is to make sure that you're in the best position to start with, and that you're able to recover as fast as possible. And speaking of recovery, I actually got a blood test 2 days ago. I still haven't got my results back. That'll be in the next week or so. But I do get a basic metabolic panel, including my androgen levels, every 6 to 12 months in and off season. I'll do that. But, I think, look, there is going to be a hereditary component there in terms of testosterone levels. That's an undeniable piece. There's obviously an age component. It's in theory, 25 is what we sort of peak. After that, we may decline. But there's also going to be lifestyle factors. We know situations of high stress are likely going to decrease testosterone. Yeah. We know keeping fats chronically low may influence. But then also energy intake influences that as well. So it's hard to know. It's probably going to be a combination piece.
For sure. How do you de-stress, man? Because like in terms of like people are very busy, they're getting like people are doing a lot of stuff done. Like training just takes so much out of your system when you're doing it. Like, obviously, like I've been talking to like my naturopath and stuff at the moment, trying to figure out, because like my testosterone could definitely be better if my cortisol wasn't as high, and my estrogen converted a little bit better if I had better liver health. So I'm like trying to figure out, I'm like, okay, like what are the things that I can like tangibly do in order to make sure that like I can support my body, get my test up.
Well, this is the thing. Like, if you're a natural athlete, you don't have exogenous pharmacology to lean on, right? All we can do is give our body the tools it needs to function as optimally as possible. And outside of that, we're not in the driver's seat. And stress is an interesting thing, because as you mentioned, stress comes in multiple kind of varieties, so to speak. Training is indeed a stress, arguably, and it's a good stress in facilitating the adaptation that we want in the appropriate doses, that is. But you're right in that other forms of stress are not so productive, and your total stress load needs to be managed. When we're looking at general like environmental stress, like, I'm really stressed right now, it's usually comes like, in terms of psychological stress, it usually comes down to how do you perceive your environment? Are you perceiving your environment as threatening? Yes. Good. Like, not so good. Big punch in sympathetic, big sympathetic response. We're going to get that catecholaminergic secretion happening. That's going to attenuate other hormones. So, easier said than done in a technologically savvy world where we're always connected to others and always connected to our work. But managing, how we perceive our environment, I think is a very important piece, but also managing sleep. If we look at the volume of sleep we're accumulating, or most individuals are accumulating, it's actually pretty low compared to, how we're designed. We just,
Oh man, yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. Like, sleep's one of the biggest ones. Like, for me, I try to focus on it all the time, and I'm like tracking all the things and doing all the stuff. And I've finally just started to get like some really good sleep over the past like 2 weeks, and I've been like waiting for like my weight to drop. Like, I've been tracking, it's been the same thing pretty much all the time. I'm like, I'm getting a little bit leaner, but the weight's the same. Then I had a real good sleep last night, and then boom, dropped a kilo. I was like, yes.
Well, see, this is a really common piece. For example, cortisol. I mean, people demonize cortisol. Like, cortisol's bad. And I would say, like, well, every hormone has function, but like anything, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. I mean, cortisol, we're going to secrete that from the adrenal gland. It's going to help with mobilizing energy substrates. I mean, I would argue that's a good thing if a lion is chasing you or you're trained hard in the gym. But when it's chronically elevated, that's a problem. Chronically elevated cortisol can contribute to fluid retention. Yes. I do believe it has a partial affinity to a mineralocorticoid receptor that's coded for hormones that controls fluid balance. So when you do get a good night's sleep, it's quite possible that, hey, you just get that nice, a longer period of recovery in a parasympathetic state. You're able to decrease that cortisol. You're able to just have that whoosh where you get rid of that bit of fluid. And we definitely find, just to not to go off on too much of a tangent, but the leaner someone gets, like when someone's going from lean to very lean, that's usually when body weight has a little less correlative power to body composition change. For two reasons. This is for the natural, not the enhanced. For a couple of reasons. One is because the volume of fat loss you're losing per unit of time is less, which means it's easier to wash that out with transient fluctuation. And two is because the transient fluctuations in body weight are probably going to be higher than usual, because you got cortisol going up and down with more contrast than usual. But in addition to that, cortisol doesn't just affect fluid balance, it affects a variety of things, inclusive of gastrointestinal motility, and that means you're going to have you're going to the bathroom with more or less frequency, etc. So, in your scenario where you're at now, it's really quite common to have that hold drop, because you didn't drop a kilo of fat mass overnight, right? But you also knew you were making a response over the past week based on visual markers. So you have that hold and drop where basically you're making progress fat loss wise, but something's masking it. Then you can materialize that loss on the scales maybe after a good night's sleep when you've down the stress response.
Oh man, I just love how you explain that. I'm gonna watch what you just said then like 20 times, because like I really want to learn that. Which I find is great. You also mentioned there too, like obviously it's a little bit different when you're like 2 to 3 weeks out, which kind of leads to like my last question is like, well, not my last question, is one of my last questions. Is like, what is one of your like favorite, because obviously there's always different ways to do things for peak week, but what is like one of your favorite ways to actually like do a peak week?
Yeah, well, I think in order to give a logical basis for the couple of things that I'll bring up in a moment, I suppose it's important to get an understanding of really what a peak week should entail, because peak week for most individuals is going to be the last 7-ish days coming into a show, and really the idea here is to take your already very good physique and basically exploit all the good things about your physique. Basically what you're doing is you're capitalizing on the already successful contest preparation. You've got the conditioning you want. So what we want to do there is we want to down the stress response through a tapering of training. We want to increase our stress recovery pool by returning back to energy maintenance. We want to, and as part of adjusting our energy intake, we're going to adjust our carbohydrate intake so that we can top up muscle carbohydrate stores, so muscle glycogen, which is obviously going to facilitate an increase in fluid uptake into those tissues and give us volume to the muscle. So we're getting leaner in the peak week. The answer is no. But if we are already lean, we're going to be able to show off our leanness, so to speak. The saying I have is we get flat to look lean, fill out to look lean. We get flat to get lean, fill out to look lean. Because we need to obviously deplete muscle glycogen stores and liver glycogen for that matter to persuade our physiology to liberate energy from fat mass. But then at the end of when we get on stage, we want to top that up. So the function of the peak week is quite simplistic. Okay. There's just many ways to go about it. My best recommendation though is to play with safe variables.
Yeah.
And work within, safe parameters. If you're looking good coming into the peak week, the last thing you want to do is look worse. Really what you're trying to do is just look that additional 1 or 2% better. And I would argue that the leaner the athlete is, the better or the more visual difference the peak week is going to make. If someone's semi-lean, makes a little bit of difference. Someone's very lean, okay, you could probably make, instead of a 1% better look, a 5% better look. So my ideal, to the actual stuff, my total ideal is to have an athlete ready, a couple of weeks out from the show. And basically what that affords you the capacity to do is to incrementally / strategically increase calories over that next bit of time and close in the energy gap. And basically what that does is it almost circumvents the need to actually peak the athlete with the, from a nutritional perspective, with the exception of tapering down training. Go back to energy maintenance. You're going to be topping up muscle glycogen saturation. You're going to be increasing the stress recovery pool. Then you taper training down. We make some minor adjustments in terms of sodium intake on the day and modulate food volume, fiber, etc., and we roll into the show. However, if necessary, if we have an individual that needs to continue to diet pretty much all the way to the show, which does happen occasionally, then I often do what I call a mid-load, where we load carbohydrate in the middle of the week, top up muscle glycogen, and then we taper a little bit into the show to quote unquote tighten them up. So speaking in broad terms here, because again, peak week's something I really love, and I presented on this topic on multiple occasions, and it's usually a couple-hour lecture. But speaking in broad terms, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. No, I actually love that. Where do you get your most fulfillment from when you're coaching?
Sorry?
Where do you get most of your fulfillment from in terms of, I'd just say life in general, really?
Oh, I'll tell you what. Personally, I get a huge amount of fulfillment in coaching others. And I was on a podcast a little while back with Dean McKillop from Flex Success, and he asked me this interesting question. He threw it at me, and it made me think a lot. And he basically said, so him and his wife Lizzie, they basically said, what would you choose if you could only do one thing? Would you choose to compete again, yourself as an athlete, or would you choose to coach others? Oh. And I was like, oh my God, the ultimate decision. And my answer to that was coaching others, because I get a huge amount of joy out of being part of people's the journey of creating something that they never thought possible. My ultimate goal is it's not accolades. It's not I'm not tallying up pro cards.
Yeah.
It's more a matter of
You're getting shredded to motivate other people so that you can help them do the same thing. You're like, yes.
Yeah, it's more like when someone says to me, like, B, like they finished their season. Like I've had this on multiple occasions, which just rocks my world. Like, B, oh, I can't believe what we did. They're looking at their physique going like, this is insane. I never thought I could do this. And then after that, it's a bonus piece if they get awarded the trophy on stage. But in the end, like the trophy is, the trophy comes down to the how you look on the day and the opinion of 4 to 6 people. The central stuff is the most important. So it rocks. Where I get fulfillment is literally being part of that process and having people just blow their own mind with what they're able to achieve through sheer will, hard work, and strategy.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree anymore. Like, I think that's quite awesome, man. And that's definitely like extremely humble of you to do so, which I think like is awesome. So
man.
Just as like a selfish question at the moment, is like, what are you currently doing for training at the moment, man? What's that look like?
Look, my
training's intense. Your face on Instagram, I was always looking at your stories, and every time you're zooming in your face when you're training legs on the, I'm like, yes, I love that.
We're not here to look pretty in the gym. We're here to look pretty on stage. So,
yeah, so true.
Look, my training, to be honest, my training is quite simplistic.
And I love.
And I think that training in general, it's. So my training philosophies overall are, well, even when it comes to nutrition, is this. We want to keep things as simple as possible. We only want to add layers of complexity when it's necessary, right? So my training is, in general, quite simplistic. There's a real large emphasis on training quality, and I would define training quality as movement performed in a manner that is both safe and biases the target tissue, and that is applied with high intensity. And in the context of what I'm talking about when I say intensity, I'm saying proximity to failure. Like, we are training hard. So people often label this intensiveness. It's all one and the same.
Just repeat that again. So training quality is safe and bias to the muscle.
So I would say training quality is, I would define it as movement performed in a manner that is both safe and biases the target tissue, and that is applied with intensity.
Oh, I love that.
So for example, if I'm doing a leg press, for example, and I want to bias the quads, what am I going to do? I'm going to bring the feet low on the plate. And as part of that, I'm going to accumulate the largest range of movement possible, provided I'm moving through the right structures, that is the ankle, knee, and hip, and I'm working within the active range of the target tissues. And then with that beautiful movement in check that biases the muscle I want, the knee is safe, yes, because I'm moving through the right structures. Now we can layer on intensity and really like gun to your head, go hard, especially on that movement, because it's not a very technique dominant movement. But yeah, that's my definition.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. And like, how have you gained like that mind to muscle connection? Like, how do you find like that, like being present, like being in your muscles? Because I always find like personally, like it takes a lot of time to sort of build up an actual foundation that allows your body to go for intensity. Because otherwise you're just going to get fucking injured. Like it happens to me every time when I was like, oh, I've got injured here. My foundations aren't good enough. So then I go back to like foundational movements. I lighten the weight. I like am focusing on my hip, knee, ankle the whole time, targeting exactly what needs to be targeted, where it needs to be targeted. And I'll stick to that for like a few months, 6 to 8 months or something. The next minute I go back to lifting lifts that like I haven't been lifting before. And I'm like, oh, look at this weight move.
I think this is part of the skill of being a bodybuilder, because you need to lift, like I said, you need to lift with intensity, but you need to lift with quality. And I would use a combination of like external and kind of like an internal cues, right? So if we look at things externally, we're going to look at muscles by function. So on the leg press, for example, we're going to go, well, the quads are a knee extensor. How do we adjust the movement, right, within the exercise of a leg press? So we adjust the movement to bias that tissue. Or if I bring the feet lower on the plate, I'm going to create more movement through the knee. Therefore, it should bias the quad. Okay, cool. So there is the external side of things. And then we have the internal cues, in terms of, So internal cues, we're going to use more in isolation movements like squeezing muscle, etc. Right? And between those two pieces, we should be able to create movement that biases the target tissue. The skill of the bodybuilder is being able to train at a high intensity, but keep that quality in check. And I just think that you need to be honest with yourself constantly, because we, as like I was saying, as humans, we're kind of physiologically geared to avoid discomfort. And I don't think there's anyone in this world that would say that, doing a leg extension with a full range, with full shortening, and good lengthening, etc., is comfortable. It's not. That metabolite production it hurts. What do you want to do? You want to decrease the range and make it easier. Or if you're doing a compound movement, you want to move through other structures or cut the range, etc. But you got to stick with it. So I often metaphorically say that each lift has a pocket. And the pocket of the lift is what I would define as the range of movement that literally just punishes the target tissue you want. So when you find the pocket, you stay there. And that's where you require mental hardiness and skill. There's no point in putting 10 kilos more on the bar on the squat and decreasing the range of movement, because what you're doing here is you've got false progression. We look at volume accumulation, like there's a range of movement component. Okay, so if I'm moving the load less distance with more load, I'm like, there's no net gain, but what there is an increased proclivity for injury. So no one wins.
Yeah. Oh man, like for me personally, like I don't go too far down on the leg press. If I go any further down than like 90 degrees, just my back hurts, my hips jam up, like it just doesn't work for me. However, if I'm on the leg press, as you're talking about in that pocket, I love that theory. Like I'm really going to train chest after this. I'm just going to do an all pockets. But yeah, what I found out was when I'm on the leg press, if I don't go down too far and I really control and just focus, like for a quad dominant exercise, like I'm doing this purely for like the front of my quads and my VMOs. I'm going to like get those, like smash them. Like for me, just how my body works, because like hips are tight. It's like, just don't go down as far. And it just has this beautiful stimulus on my quads. I'm like, this is great. And this feels really good. And I don't have to worry about like going down too far and like fucking anything up. It's like,
this is exactly what we're talking about, like personalizing movement. I was saying like largest range possible, but you're moving through the right joint structures and you're working within the active range of the tissue. So
yeah,
you might look at me and I might go lower than you in the leg press, right?
Yeah, sure.
But that might be my safe range of movement through the right structures. Now, in your scenario, you go down that sort of depth and you've bottomed out your hip, you've got that posterior tilt of the pelvis, and now you're getting that flexing at the back. I'm like, that's not a structure we want to work through. So what's the lightest range you can work with, but moving through the right structures?
Yeah.
So that's where you got to personalize so much. So everyone asks me, like, how low should I go on the Romanian deadlift? I'm like, well, as long as you can, provided you're moving most dominantly through the hip, very small part through the knee, and nothing through the back. Once you start to get that, that move through the back, I'm like, you cut it just before then. That's as much as you can go. That might be for one person, like barbell hitting the floor, like the plates. And for another person, it might be a little less range. I'm like, you got to personalize that.
Yeah. Oh man, so true. Like for me, I just kind of go like, where's the stretch? I head to the stretch safely and then execute from there. I'm like, oh wow. I like it. It just works. It just feels so good. And also one thing you said before, I really liked, right? This is one of those skills we were talking about, like loop, like a circle moment, back to some of the things we're talking about at the start of the podcast.
Yeah.
One of the main skills from bodybuilding is being honest with yourself constantly, which one of the things with the sport, man, it's so humbling like that. And I think like if you're honest with yourself constantly, like, but not just in bodybuilding, but with everything else that you do in life as well, is just like an absolute discipline and skill that is just like no one can take away from you. That like honestly makes you more charismatic, trustworthy, loyal, and like just a better person.
100%. Bodybuilding is life.
There's so many stoic lessons here, like geez. So like I find that absolutely critical and like fantastic for everyone to know. So another question that I do have for you as well before we go is sort of how would you like best describe, or what are some of the main things that you would say to like encourage people to actually just get started and like move on with the journey in terms of just like resistance training and like living a better life in a better body?
I would just say number one piece is the time is now. I think a lot of people, particularly when it comes to drug-free bodybuilding, which is obviously what I participate in and everything that I do, people get really caught up on the fact that like, oh, it takes years to build a physique. And I would say that anything in life worth pushing for takes years. You know, you don't get a degree overnight. It takes years. But time passes you by no matter what. Like, you know, in 2 years from now, you wish you started now. So why not just start now? Like that's the best piece there. Number one. And the second thing is, as self-serving as it sounds, is seek mentorship / coaching for, and I think this is for anything in life. I mean, it cuts your learning down, you know, by such a long time. Like if I have a mentor for everything, I just feel like, why am I going to waste 3 years doing something I can learn, like to learn something half the time? So yeah. And particularly when it comes to lifting, because you want to do things right from the get-go, you know, one for your result, two for your longevity. So, you know, find someone that resonates with you. And I think that I'm getting off topic here, but I think when it comes to coaching, it's such a personal thing that there is a coach out there for everybody.
Oh, for sure.
Like I might not be the best coach for everybody, but that's okay. There is a coach out there for everybody. So get to know whoever you want to work with. You know, do your personalities align? Does their academic background align? What results they create for others and what others say about them? Like, you know, I'm getting off topic here, but just in general, hopefully there's 2 points.
Yeah, it is. What are like your inputs, man? Like, what do you actually study when you go to research stuff? Or like, what do you find as like, okay, like either even just like, who do you follow? Like, who do you follow? What do you research? Where do you study? Where do you get like, you know, ideas for your inputs to put like your pen on paper and be like, yes, I'm gonna use this.
Look, I think in our industry, I do keep up to date as much as I can. You know, all through all the you know, the fundamental guys that I think are fantastic are, as most people would know, you know, Eric Helms at the top of my list for sure. Appreciate you, my man. So Eric Helms and you know, there's a few others out there as well. Brad Schoenfeld, obviously a legend in his own right. Asker Dukendrup, he's great when it comes to sports nutrition. And there's a few others out there and these are the guys that I would definitely, you know, actively look at their research. You know, from my perspective, you know, I don't personally conduct research. My fiance is an academic. That's what she does as part of her work. In terms of my academic, she's the soon-to-be doctor in our family. Yeah. But, you know, from my perspective, my academic background is not actually super impressive. To be totally honest, I don't have a PhD or anything like that. I am working on my master's in science at the moment. You know, and I've studied on and off for the, you know, between exercise science / nutrition science for we're coming up to like, you know, 9 years now. Yeah. So, you know, learning is just it's a forever process. It really is.
Yeah. And like for myself personally as well, the way I like to look at things, like, yes, can get an education in these things, but also experience really counts as well. And sometimes if you want to get good at something, it's like you just got to do it, because there's certain things that in, like, obviously what I think when you study something or get a degree, because I got like a bachelor's degree in business and stuff, I just paid for a system to learn like all of the stuff that they've recommended, which is great and fantastic. Like I learned all this stuff, but there's so many other systems and things that other people have learned who haven't done any of that, which for me are like just as valuable, like for sure. Which I find absolutely fantastic, which is why I sort of like asked you that question, is like, what do you actually go to do your research? But I'm guessing like, obviously you do study and all that great stuff as well. But like, I'm just assuming most of your stuff, you've just literally learned from experience and passion and being like super passionate about the people that you coach and what you actually do. And you've figured all these things out. Because man, even some of the words that you say and like the definitions that you've created up yourself, like is self-study, man. And it's impressive. And I'm writing them down. Like I've got already like 3 or 4 pages of notes here. Like even when when we did a coaching call beforehand, I had like 2 A4 paper, not A4, like A3 or A2 pieces of paper, like the big ones. I'm just like all this stuff written out and all these diagrams, like, yes, to try and understand it better. Because obviously when you actually understand something, and you can put it into your vocabulary and like use it while you're doing something or while you're training or how you're eating, or is it just motivation? Like if you've got it in the back of your mind before you're about to do something and make a decision, it's going to like improve your life and make it so much better. So like, that's why I ask kind of like where your inputs are, man. Do you have any others? Like, do you just like focus so much on what you're doing and you just kind of create systems for people and you're like, that worked. Hell yes, I'm keeping that one.
I think everything comes together, as in like, evidence-informed practice is essentially the combination of, science meets best practice meets anecdote. Because particularly in bodybuilding, we are becoming there's more research available year after year, but no matter what happens, there's never going to be, a single paper that you can refer to and say like, this is going to be your everything. Because, even if, as the body of literature surrounding bodybuilding gets more and more complete, studies look at, at averages of their sample population, and you are N1, my friend. And this, I think that you need to have that fundamental understanding, biochemistry, etc., so that you have the ability to think logically. Then you can take into consideration, research, and then you lean on your experiential learning as well to formulate a solution for everyone's problem. And that's the art of coaching. And I think that the more and more you coach, you kind of like, it's taking information, turning information into knowledge, turning knowledge into wisdom. That's really and then constantly adding to it. I mean, I think that the life is in itself a learning process, and the coaching process itself is something you continually add to. And that's, for me and the athletes that I have the pleasure and honor of working with, it's something that I'm very committed to, always bettering myself as a coach, but like I said, both through conventional academic pathways, but also through, like I was saying, participating in self-reflection. What worked, what didn't work, what can we do better? I'm stoked to say that where I'm at with my coaching, very rarely do we have something that doesn't work, but there's always something that can be done better. And I think that, you shouldn't be complacent in that regard as a professional in whatever industry you're doing, whether it's, I don't know, metal work, you're a ball maker, or whether it's, you're a health professional or a coach for bodybuilding. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, you're just like, I love that you said all that. That was just like pure fire just there, and you can tell that I like your like so much conviction. And if you guys couldn't see, like whilst Brandon was talking, I was like fist bumping. I was like, yes. I
got to say, it's been a really interesting conversation today, because I've done a variety of podcasts over the years, and on a lot of occasions it's been very, very like mechanistic, whereas this has been great. There's been some philosophical stuff that's came about. It's been fantastic. So
this has a bit of up and down with all the good stuff, man. We just like chuck in like a podcast combo with Brandon. Yeah, which is fantastic, man. Well, I just like to say, dude, like not only the natural people's champion, but you're the coach's champion as well. Like my man, he's going out there getting it done, motivating all of us to be better, man. You want to, like I say, multiple people at a time, which is fantastic. So, man, before we wrap up, where can people like find you?
You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Brandon Kempter, but I'm sure if you search BK Conditioning, you'll also find it. I am perhaps a little bit one-dimensional with my social media, in that Instagram is the primary place you can find me. If you do like the old book face, you can find me on Facebook as well. But I just have a personal page on there. But Instagram is where it's at. I will admit I'm not super active on there, but I'll do my best, guys. And feel free to reach out, with a DM if you if you found this podcast, or of course, any of my other content interesting. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I'll link all of Brandon's details in the links below, so you can find all of those, and I'll put in some of the highlights from like all my notes that I wrote down, because like they're quite fantastic. And yeah, I'm moving to Gold Coast too, guys, so if you're listening, I'm going to try to rope Brandon in for a training session. We'll film it, and I'm sure that I'll probably cry. My faces may look worse than his do. So like,
fantastic to get a session in. I'm sure it'll be a ripper too. Can't wait.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you guys in the next one.